My name is Kathryn Cook. I am the head of photography at the International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva. I'm very happy to have the opportunity for this panel discussion, which highlights the partnership between Canon and the International Committee of the Red Cross. A quick note to let you know that we have two people on either aisles that have microphones. We would very much like this to be a discussion with the audience, with our panel, our panelists. So if you have a question or a comment during the session, during this hour, please raise your hand and make it known to either of these people, and we will be happy to have you stand up and share your thoughts. So now, I would like to invite the panelists to come on the stage, please. And I wanted to give you a little bit of a background about how this collaboration began. About 2 years ago, in Perpignan, the Canon, I don't know where he is, if Luca Rocco's in the room, we had a conversation about the amazing storytelling that was going on and how Canon and the ICRC had a lot in common in terms of looking for opportunities to encourage photographers to resources and platforms to allow them to tell stories. So we embarked on a large brainstorming session to understand how this could happen on various levels. And one of those projects that was born from that conversation is one that we will highlight today. And so now that our panelists are more or less in place, I will introduce them. I would like to start with Emma Hope, who is heading up Canon's sustainability program. Fabrizio Carboni, who is the ICRC's head of the Middle East. We have Anush Babajanyan, I'm very sorry for mispronouncing your name, who is a very talented photographer who will speak to you about her professional experiences. Patrick Bass, who is a photographer and founder of the Beirut Center of Photography. We have Ayda, Ghoul, who is a head of the ICRC office in Ain al-Halway Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. And we have a very special guest with us who is a participant in the program we did in Lebanon, Daniel Obeid, and our colleague Roham, who's in charge of the program in Ain al-Halway, who will be translating for Daniel. So I'd really like to start off with Daniel. Yes, with the mic. Can you give us a bit of an idea of how you started off, what this project has meant to you? You were here last year in Perpignan, you were in the education program, and now you're back again this year. So maybe if you could reflect a little bit on what this has meant to you.
اوكي. هاي السنة الثانية اللي أنا هون ببربانيا. اوكي. الفرق بين هاي السنة والسنة اللي مرقت إنه السنة اللي مرقت كانت أول مرة إلي، أول تجربة كانت إلي، حتى أول سفرة كانت إلي، وكان شيء كتير حلو إنه شارك وكون موجود مثل هيك إيفنت. Okay.
So as not to forget anything, I asked him just to stop so that I can interpret what he's saying. He's saying that the first time for him last year was not only the first time he participates in such an event, it was his first time to travel outside Lebanon, where the Ain al-Halway refugee camp is. So it was pretty exciting. It was a new experience on all levels, but this year it's a bit different.
هالسنة غير، هالسنة جاي حامل رسالة، جاي جدي أكتر، حامل رسالة إلي اللي حابب أوصلها، ورسالة يمكن كتير غيري، مش بس يلي كانوا معي كمان بالبروجكت، وكتير عالم، آلاف من الأشخاص.
This year it's different because he's more serious, more confident. He's more responsible, carrying the voice and message of not only himself, but his group who were participating with him and didn't have the chance to be here with us. And also other thousands of Palestinian young refugees in Lebanon and around the world.
Great. And from that, I would love to have Patrick Bass, who was the primary mentor for this group. They had, I think, 10 or 12 different workshops series of workshops. If you could reflect a little bit on why this was so important, what you've seen happen with these students.
The important thing is that they managed to get in the street with a camera and face their own society, their own environment, and take pictures. I mean, most of you probably do not realize what a refugee camp of 1 square kilometer with 100,000 people living in it and 35 different armed factions. So imagine that you're going to go walk in the street with a camera and try to take pictures around. That's almost impossible. So we managed with the ICRC and the help of the students, because they know almost everyone, and they start saying to people that they're going to take pictures. They're going to shoot around with a camera, not with a gun, and just tell the story of their daily life there. And that was very important for them because they finally they managed to cross this invisible border of clicking and telling a story, a visual story of the campground. And imagine five people with a camera walking in that kind of environment was almost impossible. So it's not only, for me, it's not only about the photographers who took the pictures, but it's also about the society there who start getting used to having photographers around and being photographed and accepting the fact that it's not, I wouldn't say haram, it's a big word, but it's easy to be photographed. I mean, just accept the fact that people want to tell you a story. And that's also, I mean, you have to look at it in both ways, not only on the photographer's way, but the society that has to accept the presence of the photographers.
Right, thank you. We have a video, we wanted to show you a short video, if we can play that from the back. So this gives you a glimpse into what they experience in their workshops. And I don't know if any of you have remember when you go back to the very beginning and when you were just starting to take pictures and how that felt to you. And where you start finding the resources and the platforms to develop as a photographer and to find somewhere to publish your work. And I would love to talk to Emma Hope, the head of Canon Sustainability Program, a little bit and understand what this means for Canon and why this partnership is so important when you're looking at supporting young people.
Yeah, and I think, Patrick, you said there, what I really loved is people do want to listen, people do want to hear, and I think that's it. Simply put, it's about giving young people a voice to say what they want to say. And I think for success for Canon it's not when the process gets talked about. And of course the process is really important. You know, giving access to equipment and good quality training and trainers. But when the output is what is being talked about and communicated about, when it's the young person's story and the young people's story, which is what's getting the attention, that is success. And Canon's just the enabler in all of that. So that's success.
Which brings us to, you know, as an organization, for the ICRC anyway, there are many organizations that find imagery obviously extremely important for their communications, to represent who they are, what their work is, magazines. I mean, there's media, there's organizations, there's photographers. So I would love to go to Fabrizio Carboni and talk a little bit about why images are so important to the International Red Cross. We did see the winner last night of the ICRC Humanitarian Visa d'Or, Abdullah Munem Isa, and his work is extremely powerful. And we see that the group that we have been mentoring here in Lebanon, they're at the very beginning, but there is a trajectory and there is a path ahead. And we're very excited to see Abdullah Munem's work, and maybe Fabrizio can elaborate a little bit more about what that kind of imagery means to us.
I mean, first of all, I think I would a word on the ICRC. We are a conflict organization. We are, you know, when we create the ICRC, is to have a humanitarian organization present in the battlefield, and I think it's always important to keep this in mind when we talk about photography and we talk about ICRC. Why this project is important, I think there are two reasons. The first one is just our work. You know, our work in communities affected by violence and conflict, and our capacity to engage community and give them some form of dignity. And I think the capacity for the people of Ain and Elway to talk about their daily life beyond the classical, I would say, framework of conflict and violence was really important. It was really important to show people affected by this instability as actors. Very often, pictures are taken, reports are made by people from the outside. And we believe that sometimes we project a passive image of people living in situation of conflict and violence. And I think this is something very important. They are actors, they are living, they have a life, they have happy moments, sad moments, and it's not just about wounded, dead, destruction. There is a range of situation and emotion which needs to be captured, and this gives dignity to people. The second aspect, I would say, of imagery and photography in the ICRC, it's a very pragmatic one. I started in the ICRC 20 years ago, and in all the conflicts where I worked, save one, they are all still active. What does it mean? It means that today conflict lasts 20, 30 years, and it's hard to keep the attention of people, attention of donors, attention of the media. I mean, a good example is Syria. You know, Syria was, you know, top in the media for years. Today, really, very little coverage. The only coverage we had was related to the end of the caliphate in northeast Syria, when we had all these people leaving the last territory controlled by the Islamic State group. And we had media attention because they were foreigners. So disappear from the map. The same for Darfur. You all remember 10 years ago, George Clooney in Darfur, you know, everybody was talking about Darfur. Darfur is still active. Who talks about Darfur today? So one of the challenges we have as a humanitarian organization is to keep the attention on protracted crisis. Ain el-Elway is a perfect example of a protracted crisis. 1948, that's when we built the camp. Still today, you have there a situation which requires humanitarian attention. Who talks about Ain el-Elway? Nobody. So we have these two aspects in the ICRC. Help the community, engage the community, and the other one to make the humanitarian crisis, the protracted crisis exist through photography, through storytelling. And it's a challenge for us. It's really difficult, but I'm very happy that we have this partnership with Canon. It's not a given for a private company like Canon to engage with the ICRC because we work in let's put it, toxic environments. And it's not easy. And I really would like to thank Canon to take this risk. Let's call it like a small risk to work with us in highly politicized, very divisive environment. But I really think that we made it. I really think that the story told by friends now, I think, in Ain el-Elway, it's this story of nuances, this story of life, of dignity, and I think we achieve our objective.
Thank you. And following that, I think what we're looking at now is really how do we encourage the diversity? How do we encourage those that want to tell stories in their own community to do so? And I would love to know from Daniel, what does it mean to you to be able to tell your own story about your own community? And what have the challenges been for you before you started and then after you started the program?
اوكي بيعني لي كتير اول شيء انه انقل الصورة وانقل رسالة، ومش بس رسالتي انا متأكد، رسالة كتير، رسالة يمكن مش سكان بس مخيم عن الحلوة، في مخيمات غيره كتير بلبنان وبالعالم، يعني يمكن أكتر من نص سكان المخيمات بجميع العالم بيعانوا من نفس المشكلة اللي هي مشكلة الوضع الأمني، مشكلة الوضع الصحي، مشكلة الوضع الاجتماعي وما حدا يعني بيقدر يغير بوضعه بهيك بيئة فعلا، لأنه عن جد بيئة كتير صعبة للعيشة، بيئة كتير صعبة للتعليم، بيئة كتير صعبة حتى للصحة.
It's a big responsibility to talk about a local community such as a refugee camp for Palestinians, because those people, they have very difficult conditions in which they live. They are not able to live just like other people outside those camps. And we're not talking about fancy dreams, we're just talking about the basics, healthcare, social care, job opportunities. So he thinks that this is very important, that he is able to sound and give the voice of those people to all of you to know how those people live.
الصعوبات اللي واجهتها أنا، ومن بعض الصعوبات اللي واجهتها أنا واللي هي كانت بالنسبة إلي كتير صعبة، وحتى كان باتريك كمان شافها، إنه قصة حتى صورة واحدة ممكن نقدر نصورها ما نقدر، لأنه يكون لعدة أسباب أمنية سياسية، ما هنحكي بالضبط بهالأسباب، وغير هيك ما كان في حدا ممكن يقدر يوصل صوت هالعالم لبرا بالطريقة الصحيحة. من سنين هالعالم بتعاني، من سنين بتمرق بمشاكل، من سنين بتموت كل يوم، من سنين عم بتموت لأسباب أمنية، عم بتموت لأسباب صحية، يعني حتى عم بتموت وهي عايشة هالعالم، لا عم تقدر تاكل مثل الخلاق، ما عم تقدر تاكل منيح، ما عم تقدر تتعلم، عم بيطلعوا أولادهم من المدارس. يعني فتنا وشوفنا كيف هالعالم عايش بوضع كتير سيء بكل أشكاله.
Some of the challenges were that they were not able to take even a single image, just as Patrick said, the trainer of the group, because of different reasons, political, security reasons, even the conception of people of being photographed. It was something new for them. They were not used to people taking their photos in their daily life. And it was very important for Daniel and his group to take photos of Ain al-Hilwa because they wanted to show the real life of those people. Because it's very difficult for other people to show how they really live. Even if a photographer comes from outside Ain al-Hilwa, he will look at things differently. They wanted to show Ain al-Hilwa from their own perspective. He and his group wanted to show what simple problems those people have, like, for example, dying because they didn't have money for healthcare, or dying because of malnutrition, even dying alive, as he said, which means that they were not living the way they want to live.
Thank you, Daniel. I would love to know from our colleague Ayda, who is head of our office in Ain al-Hilwa, a little bit about, we have this program and the workshops for now are over, taking a break anyway. What do you see for 2020? What does this mean in terms of like the sustainability of a project like this? What happens next?
Yeah, definitely. So in that camp, our overall approach as ICRC is really about long-term responding to long-term consequences of armed violence and the socioeconomic situation in that camp. So in that sense, one of our focus is around community resilience. And this project with Canon is really about giving tools to members of the community to play a role within the community. So now we have Daniel, we have 4 other young photographers who are already in the next phase of transferring the skills and the knowledge they acquired through this project to younger members of their community. And also, as Patrick and Daniel said, this whole new thing for this population who used to be invisible or forgotten to suddenly exist through their lens is huge. And we want also to develop this more through their own community members. The other idea, we have many ideas actually after this training. We want to open a photo booth in that camp. There is this issue, because as Fabrizio said, that camp was created in 1948. And the older generation of refugees who came never realized that 80 years on, they would still be there as refugees. And this older generation died or is dying. And it's important for the younger generation to keep the identity, keep the memory. And we are thinking of doing a blog or a magazine for that camp, portraying this older generation, the first generation of refugees in Lebanon, through portraits and storytelling.
Great, thank you. So we've talked a little bit about this project. I want to zoom out, and we have with us today an extremely talented photographer, Anush, who is also the winner of this year's Canon Female Photojournalist Award, which will be presented tonight, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow. And I would like to know, Anush, now you've been a professional photographer for about 10 years, a little bit more. How was it for you to start out? Where did you get your resources? Where did you publish, and how have you made it to where you are today?
Well, it's hard to remember how I started out, but I definitely worked mainly in Armenia, and that's where I still live. And I did some work in Turkey in the beginning as well. And there were some resources in terms of courses in my country, and that's how I started out 11 years ago. But in order to move forward, I knew that I couldn't really stay in my area in Armenia or even in the larger Caucasus and Turkey, I had to go out and travel and communicate with editors, with other photographers to develop myself, to see how, and then bring that knowledge into my area of sort of expertise, which I know well about, and kind of combine all of that. And so, like, I traveled to Visa Bulimaj very often. This is, I think, my 4th time here. And that made a great difference, meeting people and understanding where I should take this. And then, of course, constantly working and developing my skills of telling a story. So that's how it developed. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I know we have a lot of students in the audience. And we would love to hear how your experience is going at Visa Bulimaj, but also how you're making it work. Do we have any questions or comments so far from the audience that you wanted to? Anybody want to stand up? Not yet. Okay. I'm going to move on to another point then, and please again raise your hands if you're if you have. We have 2 people on the side aisles with microphones. Patrick, I would like to go back to you and talk a little bit about your history as a photographer and also as a mentor. And I know that you have been supporting these young photographers in Ain al-Helwa, but you also have been supporting a couple of the photographers in the audience. And why it's so important to have mentors, but also to have the resources like you have at the School for Photography in Beirut. And if you have any examples of photographers that you have been in touch with, what is the result of that?
Yeah, thanks for this. It's it's because I would have to thank AFP and Francis, who's here, and his predecessors. And when I started with AFP, today is 30 years ago, AFP asked me to build a network of photojournalists in Palestine. That was my first task. And the reason for that is because I speak Arabic, and it was easier to teach them photojournalism and to mentor them. The reason why we did that is because mainly the start was for security reason. Israeli photographers were covering the Intifada because there was nothing called photojournalism in Palestine. There were photographers, there were wedding photographers, event photographers, tourist photographers, but there was nothing called photojournalism. And suddenly the Israelis couldn't go to Palestinian villages, Palestinian areas to cover the Intifada, so we had to build a network of local photographers. And when I took over the Middle East and North Africa, I had to do the same in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in etc. Again, the reason why it happened is because of security issues. And then it developed into more and more local, what we used to call local photojournalists. But local photojournalism comes from a Western point of view. You guys are local photojournalists. I mean, you're French in France, you're local photojournalists. So they're photojournalists, as simple as that. The same way you tell the story as a French photographer from the Gilets jaunes, they tell the story of Syria with their Syrian eye. I mean, I wouldn't... We did a blog at AFP about Syrian photographers coming from Aleppo and covering the Gilets jaunes. Well, it was a nice story, but it was their approach. And when the French said, c'est la guerre, they said, non, ce n'est pas la guerre. We've been where war was, and that's not war. So this is but I would like to go back to I would say the technical approach we had in Ain al-Helwa. You need to understand that we were limited to 400 meters. Okay, when we say that we did train in, we did tell the story of Ain al-Hilwi. Not yet, because we were limited to 400 meters. As I said, you saw in the video, imagine 5 photographers in a 400-meter stretch. What kind of stories can you tell? That's one point. Second point, you have 5 photographers taking the same images. So we had to work on something different. So to divide the work and tell them, when I'm not around, what do you do? So what story do you want to tell? So the fascinating part is that Ahmad, who's not here, unfortunately, decided to work on boredom. He's a 20-year-old kid, and he can't go outside. There's no activities outside. So he worked on boredom. You can look at his images. What they do is they play video games all day. They play cards. They're sitting in a room. They can't go outside. He can't take pictures outside, especially at night. And even during daytimes, he's limited to specific areas. So with Daniel, we worked on the eldest of the camp and the 1948 that you were talking about. So, and what's her name? Fatima decided to work on the streets. But again, when you look at this, at her pictures, streets are empty. Not because the streets are empty, but because it's very difficult for her to take pictures of people. So she had to work on empty streets and hiding and taking, like, you know, it's very, and you can't like walk in the camp with the camera hanging around. So we had to buy them bags to hide the camera. And again, you're talking about 100 square kilometer camp. And we couldn't move, we could take pictures in the park, right? And on the main avenue and in the market. And again for 12 days. And then we had 12 days, so we decided to dispatch the work and everyone, and then we went outside the camp, and I was like, you know, when you see the light? So everybody went to outside the camp. Outside the camp is the southern cities of Saida, and there was the beach, and then they had to go back to the walled camp there. Yeah.
Daniel, do you have anything to add? Okay. I'd like to go back to Anush for a minute and talk about a little bit about, in addition to your own photography, you're involved in some projects with Turkey and Armenia. Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yes, when I heard about this camp that ICRC and Canon are running, it made me think of this a program that John Stanmeyer and I had just finished, and I don't know if John is here in the audience, but he's a photographer with National Geographic, and we've done a few workshops together, and we're both in the same agency, 7 Photo Agency. So. We did this workshop supported by the U.S. Embassy to bring together young photographers from Turkey and Armenia, and it connected to the conflict, but it mostly connected to the similarities, and that was the idea, to show to show just how similar we are as people, as cultures, it had 2 sides. So that was one part of it, and the other was training photographers and developing their storytelling skills. And what happens now is they run their own Instagram account that's called Bridging Stories, at bridging.stories, just like the project is named. And they have over 13,000 followers. They post constantly, and we just had our 2nd group this summer. And so this is where they come together, and this is also basically the 2nd stage of having them together in one place, showing their work through social media, being seen, and being available for editors or publications to reach out and see if they could do some work in Turkey or Armenia. And I think that's a very important part of this whole activity, because because it's the answer to the question, what happens next? How do the young people who develop their photography skills, storytelling skills, how do people find them, right? And that's very important as well, creating these databases and websites, somehow making it easy for editors to find them.
Yeah.
Yes. Sort of like the Women Photograph website, for example, has this really nice database where editors can easily find photographers from any country.
Yeah.
Just as an example. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. I don't know if I can call on anyone in the audience to share some of their experiences. I would love to know from Abdullah Munem if he has anything that he would add to this conversation in terms of what it's like to work in your own country. It's complicated, I imagine. And we do have Roham that can translate if you would like, but I think you can also speak in English if you want. We can hand a microphone down to him. I'm just going to pick on you for a second. Sorry about that. But I think that it very much adds to this kind of conversation when you're thinking of, how you're, when you start out and you are able to document your own community, and it's a conflict, and what does it mean? Kind of what is your path? And until, maybe last night, what does this mean to you?
I mean, to work in a such tricky situation in Syria, in my area. With people, I grow up with them, probably friends, neighbors, people I know them by face even. I mean, it was not easy. But what was easy for me, I mean, I were able to communicate the people, understand their problem. I mean, it's helped me a lot to document, covering the situation in Syria and Eastern Ghouta for over 5 years under siege with one of my friend Samir here. He is also, we grow up together in the same area. I mean, first time, 1 year, 2 years, it was difficult because we didn't have enough experience of this field. I mean, we start as self-taught, we start by some advice of some friend, looking at picture of, for example, Patrick Vaz, other photographer in all the world. I mean, try to collect experience from different places. But I mean, at the end, the identity of work, it's really important. I mean, each person have different how I can call it in English, different he could work through, I mean, through he can tell the story through his eyes, through the way he can be deeply more with the people, and I mean it's really important to exchange the experience between generation of old photographer with a new photographer. It's really important. It's give new I mean, like, it's give for each person a new information, new experience, like through what Patrick was speak, through like even Daniel, even Anush. I mean, like, it's really, really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Do you have something to say it? Yeah, Fabrizio.
Yeah, we'll take this one. Listening to you, I just realized something. You know, we are saturated by images, and we are also emotionally saturated. You know, when at one stage, I mean, especially, you know, working in my field, I'm often confronted with pictures, articles, and at one stage, I have the feeling to see always the same picture. And I have the impression that the community eye on a humanitarian crisis brings something different, brings, at least I'm talking for myself, brings an emotion, brings an angle which is new to me. I also like the fact that, especially when I was looking at your picture, is people are not passive, people are doing something. And that really matters a lot in our humanitarian work. You know, when you stay 20 years in the same context, your humanitarian act can't be an act of giving. It's an act where you enable people to do something. And I think in your pictures, often you have this. Often you have somebody helping the other, building something, doing something. And I think it's really important, especially for Western states, because at the end of the day, they are the one paying for humanitarian action, to see that it's not just an act of charity. Humanitarian action is not just an act of charity. It's an act of dignity. It's enabling others to do something. And I really like this approach in your picture, but also often people taking picture of their community. There is a dynamic in it. I can't see anymore the dead body. I can't see anymore the building destroyed. You know, I mean, fine, yes, but there is way more than this. And I think the way more is very important. Now, I have to be very honest with you, is that if I look at one or two pictures who made the difference in my work, they are actually pictures I would not encourage people who work with the ICRC to take. Give you an example. We discussed about it. Front page, New York Times, this kids dying on the front page, talking about Yemen. I hate this kind of pictures. As humanitarian, I really hate it. Now I have to be honest. This picture changed our life. Suddenly, Yemen was on the map. Suddenly, we had the funding. Suddenly, we could talk to the parties to the conflict and tell them, look, guys, you have a problem there. And it is one of the paradox. I have another picture, which is really also quite a traumatic experience as humanitarian, is the picture of this boy on the beach. I think it was in Greece, 4 or 5 years ago. It was Turkey. Before this picture, all our operations in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon were underfunded. We had no money. From one day to another, we didn't know what to do with the money. So there is this paradox, this tension, and obviously it's not my job to analyze this, but I'm as an observer and to some extent as a user of this, there is this paradox. On one hand, you want to tell a complex story, you want people to understand the complexity of human condition and situation, and on the other hand, what works, it's in your face, straight messages. And it's really hard, I believe, as humanitarian, and I guess for you, as journalist or future photojournalist, to navigate these two extremes.
Thank you, Fabrizio. I think we have a question in the audience.
Yes, I do, for Abdul Munem and for Daniel. Photography is a very privileged as a profession because you need a certain kind of economic freedom and a cultural freedom. I was just wondering, in a place like where you come from, there's very limited options in terms of what jobs you can take on. I was just wondering how your family reacted and how your environment reacted to you, Abdul Munem and Daniel, to pursuing this profession.
Great question. Daniel, do you want to start first, and then we'll go over to Abdul Munem?
Oh, sorry. I mean, like at the beginning, it's like it was very difficult to start work in this field. Like to get job in this work. But I mean, like I remember 2015, I sent Patrick Baz's message. I told him, I'm interesting to have touch with the AFB. I got the touch, like at the beginning it was really hard because the AFB, they do not know me. And I'm from Syria, and it was like the first year, it's like my mission to build the trust between me and the AFB. Even we didn't talk about, about the picture, like how, like, I mean, like how I work for the project, the subject, how I document, like it's good way or not good way. No, I mean, like the first year was, to make this trust between me and the AFB. Like later, I mean, like to continue work, like to go like deeply of the story of like the picture. Like to try to create, I mean, an individual, credible, like picture to really like to speak about like the situation. I'm sure wherever you are, you can get work. Yeah.
هلا أنا لحالي مستحيل ممكن يكون معه حق، يعني صعب كتير ممكن الواحد لحاله ينزل على الشارع يصور، وخصوصا بأماكن فيها يعني فيك تقول حرب، أو بأماكن مش أمنية كتير، مثلا للأسف مثل عم بصير بسوريا أو بالمخيم عنا. هون بتيجي أهمية العالم اللي المفروض تساعدك. العالم يعني مثلا نحنا مستحيل كان اقدر القط لو صورة واحدة، لو مثلا مش حاطط الفاست كانون فاست، او مثلا الاي سي ار سي ما ساعدونا. لانه انا بتذكر اكتر من 3-4 مرات اجيت انا شخصيا لعلاء بمشكلة مع العالم، ولما تيجي روهام تقول لهم اي سي ار سي وما اي سي ار سي انه يوافقوا.
He's saying that for them as individuals, it was he's not going to say impossible, but very difficult to take images and to take photos inside Ain al-Hilwi for different reasons. One of them, which would be security reasons, and more than one time and more than one incident, he was personally attacked by armed people because he was taking photos. And when I came over, because I was with them, or Patrick was with them, wearing the ICRC Canon vest, they would calm down, understand that this is something that we're doing for a reason, and we had to explain for them why we're doing this, why we're taking the photos, what's the project about. He's saying that this is where the support and help of international organizations such as ICRC and Canon comes, because on their own they can't do anything. They need the support of such organizations to make it easier for them to work inside Ain al-Hilwi.
I mean, I know your question was not directed at me, but I somehow feel that it relates because of doing a lot of work in Armenia and doing a lot of work in Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a conflict zone, not an active one. It's active on the front line where the ceasefire is being violated. So I must say I never had an easy time finding a job or like getting the interest of international publications in this area. And like you say, it's easy to find a job anywhere, but you know, in some areas are not necessarily so interesting, I guess. I don't know how to say this. Even during the war, if there was a 4-day war in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2016, where I reached out to a few editors that I knew, and there was mostly wire images were published, but not stories, in-depth stories, which I was there for. So, and that's why I'm very. It's the best part of this, the grant, the Canon Female Photojournalist grant, was to get attention, to invite the attention of people, of audience, to this land and see it in a deeper perspective, in the way, as you're saying, everyday life, not the conflict, not this striking, images, but everything that's subtle, everything that's so human, right, in the houses, and how do people live in this, and it tells the story of everything, including the conflict, just as well. And the difference here between photographers, I'm not going to use the word local, working in that particular area, or who have lived there for long, and people who live somewhere else and come, is that these other, the people who live in this area get to work there for a long time, right? We all can spend like days and months and years, and then that gives a different perspective. Well, of course, there are cases when people come in, fly in all the time and work in one place for many years, and that is great when that happens. That gives amazing results. And then it just doesn't matter anymore where you're from, whether you were born there, or, all of that doesn't make a difference anymore. But just wanted to make a point that, there are areas where it's just sometimes just really difficult, but it doesn't make it any less worthy. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Anush.
Can I add to, we're not only talking conflicts in the Middle East. There are places where there are no conflicts, but it's still very difficult to document the society you live in. You can, and I'm telling this to students, you can't just show up with your camera and say, hi, I want to take pictures. You can go back and back again and back again to wherever to the people you're going to photograph, and explain again, because the Middle East is a very complicated place, because they have issues with women, with the society. You can't take pictures of this, you can't take pictures of that. But at the end, I'm sure you can manage. If you can be very convincing, you can manage, and we did manage here and there. The second part about finding a job, again, the Middle East doesn't have a visual culture. The media do not focus on photography. You can have the best story, visual story, photo story, whatever, it will be published in the foreign press and not in local press. And this is where I join Daniel in what he's saying. If you don't have help from foreign organization or a foreign media, you cannot find a job in the Middle East in photojournalism on the standard of photojournalism we're talking about here. You can find a job of a photographer in a local paper, but doesn't mean that you're doing photojournalism. you're probably covering events or well, so it's we have to change the media approach on visual storytelling because we have a lot of photojournalists in the Middle East, but they don't have a platform to express themselves.
Thank you, Patrick. We have a question in the audience. Yes.
As far as this point is concerned, I was surprised at a Western mentality, even if from the Mediterranean, I'm Italian. And so I was very surprised of the fact that despite the help of the organization in the camp, your presence in the camp, there was not the possibility to link with internal authorities, stakeholders, schools, institutions, safeguard people, military guys, to get their support, explaining that you are doing something for people inside, not from a Western outside. Now, okay, this was a surprise, and you gave an explanation about what is the visual culture in probably in the Islamic society. But how now, through internet, the web, this can change, because internet is accessible. You don't need print something. So images, stories through the web now can open more the doors to do the profession of photographer also inside the
well, we had this discussion yesterday with my colleague here.
Okay, thank you.
Internet or Instagram or whatever is a big library, but doesn't mean it's a reference. You need to teach people who to follow. And the same discussion we had yesterday is, it's exactly like reading books. I mean, you all today know how to read, but doesn't mean that you're a great writer, doesn't mean that you can read everything. You can know that this is a photo, right? I mean, if you give me Russian Cyrillic letters, I know it's Russian Cyrillic, but I'm incapable of reading. So photography for me is exactly the same. I know it's a photo, but if I don't know how to read the photo. So Instagram is a photo library, but you have all kind of things on Instagram. So you need to teach the people who to follow, what do you want to do? What's a photo? It's not because it's there that it's a photo. And again, I always repeat the same thing. I have a microwave at home, but doesn't make me a cook. Okay, so it's cultural. You know how to cook. That's your culture in cooking. You can cook Italian food. You can cook, but you need to learn how to do it. It's not because you eat it that you know how to do it. So, internet is a tool. It's a platform. Today, as a photographer, you are your own media with internet. You don't need to go through all the medias, but you need to know what to publish. What's photography about? You know, it's really teaching photography. It's not like photography is everywhere. Yes, photography is everywhere. Books are everywhere. Literature is everywhere. When we started learning, when human beings started writing and learning, yes, literature was everywhere, but it doesn't mean that you were a great writer because you learned how to read at school. I hope I answered your question.
We have another question in the audience, yes.
Thank you to all of you, especially to the young lady in the camp who has so many ideas. About visual perception, working in development projects at the international level, we have done a lot of studies on visual perceptions of our target quote-unquote beneficiaries. So you can find a lot of references to this work. The second point is we have been watched by these 5 ladies for a moment now, up there on the screen. And I would like to thank the thinker called Paulo Freire, who more than 50 years ago proposed to us pedagogy for the oppressed. And his series inspired a lot of us in development projects. Now, at your level in that region and in this camp, what do these women and others do with the pictures they take? And could you use these pictures to help the people inside the camp build a liberated identity, as you said? I would like to know. Thank you very much.
Sure. I just want to clarify real quick. So with Canon, the ICRC has done 2 workshops. One was in a girls' school in Ramadi, which is actually the picture you're seeing behind us. That was last year. And then we have another one in Ain al-Khalwa in Lebanon. So I'm just going to kind of redirect your question to maybe Daniel and Ayda and Roham and the team. What are we thinking in terms of when we produce these pictures? What next?
Yeah, no, I think also your question is related to the role of women, if I understand well. Not only. There were 5 trainees, 2 of them are girls. One of them wants to become a wedding photographer, because when there are weddings in the camp, it's segregated between women and men. And women in the camp do not take pictures, even for social media. So for her, she finds her niche. She knows she will have the monopoly on wedding photography, which is very smart, because then I answer the other question, which is the economic question. How can you make a living out of that? And she found her place, and we really support that. And to be able to document what is a wedding ceremony in such a confined, poor and violent situation, I think this will be amazing. Also, your question, because you were surprised that those kids were exposed to possible danger. There is also something I think that was not well explained about this camp. This camp is closed by a wall. It's virtually an open-air prison. There's no police, no army. If you're a wanted person, you know that that place is a safe haven. And there are armed groups, around 20 armed groups fighting over power. It's a highly divided, confined, and small place. And there's no one neutral person. Everyone will be tagged, affiliated to one armed group. That's why those young people needed our escorts, our supports, those jackets, answering on and on again. And before even we let them go in the street, and even Patrick can testify that he didn't feel safe there. We had to go to each and every leader of armed group to tell them, this is what we are going to do. We have this partnership with Canon. There will be 5 people that will be taking pictures in the street. So definitely there was a security risk. Now I will hand the microphone to Daniel to answer the question of what's next.
Sorry. Most Israelis have never had a contact with a Palestinian citizen. Would not photos be the link?
I will let anyone on the panel decide to answer that question.
We can start with Patrick because he has this experience. Parce que tu as l'expérience
de yeah, I can tell you a story about when I started to build this Palestinian network, photojournalists. Israeli photographers were very opposed because that was for them a different view of the conflict. And I had to fight it alone. And then one day I entered the office and I saw this Israeli photographer sitting with a Palestinian photographer on a light table. We're talking early 90s. And with the loop on his negatives and trying to explain to him how it works. And that was a change for me. And I said, okay, so now they start talking. As for the Israelis looking at Palestinians, and I will not limit it to Israelis. As Patricio said, even Christian Lebanese do not connect. I'm technically Christian Lebanese. I was born and raised as Christian Lebanese. And when I talk in my community about the fact that I am doing this workshop with the ICRC, and they said, why are you doing this with Palestinians? And my answer has always been, well, I prefer they carry a camera than a Kalashnikov. And at least they can open up to you and you can open up to them. A Kalashnikov will never led to anything since the creation of human being. We keep destroying and killing ourselves. So I'm sure that the camera is a tool to exchange images of our societies, other societies, communicate. And it's an international language. You don't need to read. I mean, you read captions, of course, but I mean, you can communicate through photos. If I'm here, or Russia, or China, I mean, we can look at images and communicate and try to understand what's going on around. But I will leave it to Daniel, because he's also concerned about it.
بالنسبة لإلي كانت على طول من قبل، يعني من أول ما بلشنا هالمشروع كان في براسي شغلة يلي هي إنه أعلم الأجيال الصغيرة الأطفال، أعلمهم التصوير كرمال كمان هن يقدروا يصوروا، يقدروا يعبروا، يقدروا. يعني بالنسبة لي التصوير عبارة عن كل واحد كيف شخصيته بصور بطريقة معينة. هالشي تعلمته باتريك يعني. وكان بدي هالشي وخلي الولاد الصغار يتعلموا التصوير ليقدروا يعبروا عن الشارع اللي هن فيه، عن المخيم اللي هن فيه، عن الوضع اللي هن فيه. مش على طول يكون أشخاص محددين يلي هن هم بيوصلوا، لا، خلي الكل يعرف يوصل رسالة، وهيك الرسالة بقت توصل أسرع لبرا العالم، بتعرفها أكتر، وهيك ممكن يبطلوا منسيين مثل كتير عالم يعني. ونحنا بالجروب يعني كنا عم نفكر وفعليا بدنا ننفذ انستغرام اكاونت للمخيم لنحط صورنا فيه وصور العالم. ممكن الأولاد اللي علمناها عالم غيرنا موجودة بالمخيم عم بتصور. الانستغرام كل العالم موجود، كل العالم عند انستغرام اكاونت ليقدروا يشوفوا المخيم من وجهة نظر أهله، مش من وجهة نظر حدا جاي من برا. بعتقد انه اي حدا بيجي من برا بكون عنده فكرة معينة عن المخيم، بيجي بصورها وبفل، بس ما بيوصل الفكرة المضبوطة عن المخيم، ما بيوصل حقيقة المخيم والحياة الحقيقية الموجودة بقلب المخيم.
To answer both of your questions about what's next and how would people interact with Palestinians inside the refugee camp, he's saying that he and his group especially him. He was transferring knowledge of photography that he has acquired to young children. This is also part of the ICRC project in Ain al-Hilwa. We have a project with young children. So he was mentoring those children on how to introduce them to the camera, how to use a camera, how to take photos through their own eyes, those innocent children, to teach them how to express themselves through imagery. And he's saying that he and his group want to start an Instagram account where they would publish photos of the streets of Ain al-Hilwa, because he thinks that everyone who comes from outside Ain al-Hilwa doesn't really understand how those people live and what do they want other people to know about them. So an image of a photographer, although he might be professional, is different from the ones that they produce, the community themselves. So this is what they want to do next.
Just a very small word. For me, as a facilitator of this project, it was really interesting to observe the psychosocial support that this partnership with Canon and the training of Patrick gave to the kids and the community. One of them, Ahmad, is the kind of boy that would not look anyone in the eyes because he's very shy. And that camera allowed him to really interact with people. And then Patrick was pushing him to express himself about this photography. Why did you choose this picture? Why do you want to show that? What does it mean to you? So definitely, I think the psychosocial part was very strong, and hopefully they managed to self-realize themselves and find out their personality. Like Daniel said, it's also about the personality of each one of them. Each one of them had other vision, other type of photography, other sensibility, and that was very interesting to see.
Thank you, Ayda. We are almost out of time, and I really want to thank all of our panelists. Just to emphasize, this is by no means a conclusion. This is opening up a conversation. It's one example of how partnerships can be valuable. We've learned a lot. We have a long way to go. There's a lot of different formulas to find partnerships, to support your work, to find platforms, to make it happen. And I just want to leave a final word with Emma Hope. I think she has done an incredible job with the sustainability program, and she's shared with me many examples of concrete examples of how their partnerships have had concrete outcomes, and then we will say goodbye. So Emma, can you give us a last closing?
Last word? Oh, wow. I'm honored. Yeah, like I said at the beginning, it's all about the stories of the young people, and working on this program for Canon has been an extreme privilege. I've learnt so much. We run these programs across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and as you can imagine, the young people we work with and the stories they tell across all of those different countries are very different. But what I love about it is when the young person, they turn to you and say, I can't believe we were listened to, when their story gets put into the press or the media and action is taken. And yeah, that's what we want. That's the story that we want to be heard. So
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Emma. Thank you to our panelists for coming a long way. And thank you to the audience for listening and participating. We really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful afternoon.